Module 4, Part 1. Today we're going to talk about agility and innovation during a crisis. And in Part 1, we're going to address when things don't go as planned. So, we've determined that the crisis is not going as planned by our emergency response protocol. In other words, things are happening that we did not expect. So, when you think about crises, they have what we call the seeds of success as well as those of failure. So if you can prevent the crisis, and oftentimes in healthcare situations we are not creating the crisis, but if it is internal, definitely it's an opportunity to work on prevention. What we do best is to prepare to manage the crisis. We know we will have them. We do the best to prepare through our crisis teams, our crisis procedures, our mock drills. And we recognize the crisis because they can happen inside our organizations as well as outside. So we try to prevent, but otherwise be honest and direct about the issue. Many of the crises we will experience as healthcare managers, however, are from the outside. So we try to contain the crisis. We make tough decisions and we need to make them fast. And then finally resolve it. If it is an incident, it may be over within a matter of hours. However, such as we've been living through a pandemic, it could take longer than a year and will take different skills to manage. So it's important in our roles that we know the difference and we prepare for both. So we know that we make decisions quickly under changing situations. First, take a deep breath. Take a moment. Think through, define the decision. Think through your options about that decision. Then fall back on your values, what your organization stands for, what you stand for in terms of integrity, trust, decisiveness, and ask for perspective. That's why we have the incident command centers that I've talked a lot about. Lots of perspectives based on specialty knowledge and what each individual has gone through in their own experiences in dealing with crises. And you empower leaders who have good judgment and good character. So you try it. So what do effective leaders do during a crisis? 4 leadership behaviors. And some of these are tough if you're an individual who likes to take time to think through what will be the best approach. In often cases during a crisis, you don't have time. So you decide with speed over precision. Best leaders can quickly process the available information, determine what the priorities are, make smart trade-offs, name decision makers, and embrace action and don't make mistakes. However, we know mistakes could occur. Behavior 2, adapt boldly. Best leaders decide what not to do throughout the playbook when it's not working and make sure communications to the frontline staff are stellar. Behavior 3, reliably deliver. Best leaders stay alert to change and information, measure performance, see what's working, and take care of themselves. You have to think about, especially when these crises go on for a while, to have a proper diet, get some good exercise, and definitely take time to rest. Behavior 4, engage for impact. Best leaders engage their teams by touching base with individual team members, digging deep to engage to avoid communication breakdowns, asking for help when needed to ensure that we are able to stay focused on both our patients, our clients, and employees, and amplify positive messages. So what are some key questions you could ask during a crisis? What are your biggest worries or concerns? And again, an opportunity to practice active listening. Repeat what you think you heard them say. Paint a clearer picture of next steps, both yours and what you're asking the team members to do. I often find that I think so much in my head that I've already done the first paragraph in my head, so I start with paragraph 2. And a bunch of faces staring at you like, I'm not sure where to start. So make sure you are very thoughtful in how you describe what actions you need them to take and give them a good picture of it. Take the time to ask how you're feeling right now. People are going to feel stressed. They're going to need an outlet to speak up and talk about it. And just a moment can make all the difference in how a person continues to respond to that situation. Ask them, how do you feel our actions are going? Maybe they've got a great idea, but they've been too shy or too scared to share it. And it might be what we need to be doing right now. Ask them, what questions do you have for me? Sometimes, again, staff don't feel comfortable asking questions without being invited to ask. And this one's really important. How can I help? Whether it's a crisis, it's always good to hear somebody say, particularly in a leadership role, how can I help? It may be they need the simplest product or equipment and it'll make their job so much easier. And are you clear on what you need to do next? Some people do truly become befuddled or questioning whether their actions are making sense based on what they know, and maybe just need to be able to express that, and maybe a better way is pointed out. And finally, is there something we are not doing right now that we should be doing? So how to effectively use your resources during a crisis. So again, you've got your crisis disaster team, incident command. You've got your electronic portals telling you, what your supply levels are and what patients are coming through, if that's the case. And have a paper copy of the crisis plan and any other important documents just in case. Make sure you know where all your assets are and that you've got information about your key stakeholders so you can reach them. And you keep a log of the events and the grab bag. What are the essential items you need during a disaster? This is your own grab bag, have it at the ready. So in one of my previous roles, I had to work at the Emergency Operations Center for the county. And when hurricane season here in Florida approaches, we always have our grab bags ready to go. And in it, it'll be everything from your favorite snacks to something to read when you're off shift if you have to stay at the center, to changes of clothing, things to refresh yourself with. That's your own grab bag. It's what you need if you know that you're going to be away from home for a few days and you need to, stay as healthy as possible. And lots of batteries and light sources. Don't forget those. So the upside of crisis. So is there an upside? We are currently living through this major pandemic, and I'm sure it's affected you as it has affected all of us. And we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know when we turn to whatever normal is. It will be a new normal. But so the upside of crisis. So crisis does break the status quo. And people have gotten very creative during this crisis. One of my favorite activities, I think I already mentioned, was I learned to lay bricks because I had a lot of time on my hands, given that I, couldn't leave the house for a long time. Crisis creates change. And some of that change is going to be good. For a lot of the people that have always gone to the office every day, they're learning that they can work pretty productively from home. It may change office landscapes in the future. And finally, crisis response determines our future. So if we handle crises well, that is something wonderful. But if things have gone wrong, it's an opportunity to really examine what didn't work and how might that work better in the future. And certainly the crises of a pandemic, as we're all experiencing, is definitely going to change the way our futures look. So let's look specifically at the coronavirus. Any upside? Can you think of any positives that have resulted in your life as a result of this horrific pandemic? Take a moment. Think about it. Write it down. Did you look at the slides and articles that talked about the quality of air and how it has improved? Or no school shootings? Did you pause to think about what was important? Have more time with those closest to you? Well, we focus on the beginning of this particular crisis in China. Did you know that the word crisis in Chinese has two characters? One represents danger, the other represents change point. We can indeed learn from this pandemic, learn what went wrong and why, what we can change in our disaster plans to better address such a situation in the future, and learn what we probably should have done sooner. What would you add to this list? Again, take a moment, write it down. So in closing on this brief part one, let's take a moment back and look at our planning P during a crisis. You know that we had our initial response phase, we've had our proactive phase, and we keep going around that blue section, our operational period. And for some, the plan, do, adjust, check, or plan, do, check, adjust, the PDCA cycle that we've often learned about in our quality methods courses, is also another opportunity for planning during a crisis. So that ends part one of module 4. I'll be curious to hear in your papers or in your reflections what you've learned, particularly from this pandemic or any crisis that you've been a part of. But this one's particularly important because it's going on for so long, and it will change the way that we do business in the future.